Okay, well, there's plenty of other music involved in this. Let's start by talking about the opening themes. Now, on the Japanese side, they have a version of Together that has some really great instrumentation, but parallel to that, on the English side, we have not the Diamond and Pearl original theme, the Breeze Barkinski rap one, but actually a song that would become the second Diamond and Pearl dub theme, We Will Be Heroes, which... Yeah, so that's kind of a weird backwards of what we usually get.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the Japanese one. What are your thoughts on Together? There are obviously a couple different versions of that. What do you think about it?
I've kind of always had a love-hate relationship with Together. Like, I don't enjoy listening to it, but I really enjoy, like, singing it at karaoke and, like, playing Taiko no Tatsuji and, like, and stuff like that. Like, there's something about it that's ridiculously catchy, but I've never liked it as a song. And I also have tended to shy away from the opening songs that are more about cramming in as many game vocabulary references as you can, rather than having an emotional meaning to it, I guess. Whereas I prefer opening songs like Rival or something that have a very specific story and a meaning, while also having a couple references to, like, Pokemon attacks and things, whereas this is just, it almost seems like they're just cramming things in there. I don't know. I've never loved Together.
Well, as someone who doesn't speak Japanese, I think I prefer, this is probably my favorite version of it, more or less. I like the... it reminds me of something I've never actually seen this show, but Riverdance.
Oh yeah.
I could imagine. I can imagine our main characters, but it would look completely ridiculous doing some sort of Riverdance type thing. But you know what I mean.
Somebody who's good at Flash animation can make that happen.
But yeah, I mean, I just like the way it sounds. I mean, I think it mentions a few character names, but not knowing Japanese as I do, maybe I'm kind of oblivious to how much it's trying to cram in there. So maybe that's to my benefit, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to, they can, like, look that up on, like, Bulbapedia or something. There's a lot, and unfortunately, I think it takes away from the narrative of the song, but that also could be my opinion, because it is a fun song and a catchy beat that, despite the fact that I don't love it, it's still on my playlist. and you're right, this particular version of it is quite delightful and fun while they're walking through the festival and stealing people's cotton candy and
Yeah, so, and then, like I said, on the English side we have We Will Be Heroes. So yeah, the first Diamond and Pearl dub theme was, I think it was just called Diamond and Pearl, and was by Breeze Barkinski, who we'll talk about a little bit later. And, you know, I don't dislike it as much as some folks obviously do. The rap that they had there, I think it makes that season of the show hard to marathon. It gets a little bit grating on me, but for this movie, they made this new song, which becomes the second dub theme of Diamond and Pearl. The movie version is performed by John Leffler, who wrote it with David Wolford, and you may also know, of course, performed way back on To Be a Master, You Can Do It If You Really Try. What do you think it's like having him back and doing a song again?
Like, it just feels right. Like, I don't know how to put it beyond that. Like, it's just... It's a musical sensibility that we're used to. Does that make sense in the scheme of Pokemon?
I think it does, kind of, sort of, you know, especially since we're now, you know, like a season or two past the dub switchover. I think it does help maybe ground this a little bit in the series history as much as they could given the circumstances.
Yeah, like, I'm not trying to imply necessarily, like, that there was anything wrong with any of the other songs that were not by him, but, like, yeah, there's just something familiar about that, and to the human brain, familiar is comforting. I would never turn it down.
I suppose. Now, of course, the TV version that debuts sometime after this movie is released is done by Kirsten Price, as we just mentioned, and it's more or less same lyrics. It's much shorter. There's no full version of that one like there more or less is for this one. Any thoughts on that version of it that we hear a little bit later? Like I said, it's the kind of reverse of the usual situation.
Right. I'm to be honest, I'm not as familiar with We Will Be Heroes and all its many versions, just because this was again the period of my life where I was not living in the US and not as inclined to watch it in English because the Japanese was readily available and I could understand it. So yeah, like I don't know if I have a real strong opinion on it. Sorry.
Okay, well, there's another vocal song we should probably talk about, and in the English credits, after I'll Always Remember You, there's a song, again, Breeze Barkinski does Living in the Shadow, and it's got a kind of an interesting sort of, this is another time where I can't really come up with the correct genre name for it, but it's got sort of a fun but menacing kind of, maybe not totally unlike like the old Team Rocket song from To Be a Master in that kind of vein. What do you think about that?
I like it. Like, I don't love it as much as I love I'll Always Remember You, but like, I do like they went with something that's just a little bit less pretty, because definitely the marketing in America and in Japan as well was like very much like about the versus Dialga versus Palkia and the Darkrai and like everything's like intense. So I like taking a slightly different direction with the second song in the credits in that way.
I think it's also the part of the end credits that somewhat teases this movie is of course the first part in a trilogy, so having a bit of a tonal change there, as I think it's Dialga is sort of getting heading off, and there's a little bit of a hint that this story goes on or connects to the next movie a little bit. Maybe gives that little change in tone a bit more, makes it a bit more appropriate. What do you think there?
I would definitely agree. Yeah, and like all the stuff with the reverse world, and I wouldn't say it's like necessarily a super serious song, but I do like that it has just a bit more of an energy and a darker energy to it. Like, even though it's not like a dark as in depressing song necessarily, but it just has that little bit of edge that I'll Always Remember You didn't have, and I do think that works.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is that it's a partial song, at least as far as the end credits go. There's a little more people have pieced together using some of like the DVD menus, but even then it sounds like we still don't have everything in there. Would love to hear like a full version of whatever they ended up recording there. It's kind of a shame that, the stuff post third gen, there's never been a dub commercial release of much of anything there, which is really quite a shame.
Yeah.
Now, we're not sure if this is the Japanese equivalent in some form. It may be related to a short or something like that. There's, when I was listening through the score album for this movie, at the end there's a song I kind of forgot existed. It's called like "Is It Summer?" What's that about, Anne?
Well, what is it about? It's really just one of the child, like, can you name all the Pokemon sort of call and response type song. It's like the opening is just like, yay, 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 let's sing together. Yay, 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 let's all dance. So it's kind of that type of Pokemon song. And I do remember at the time that this movie was releasing on DVD, there was a huge compilation CD released, and I think there might have been more than one that had a lot of these types of songs on it. And so I can't be sure if it was tied to any specific short, because I definitely can't find anything on it, but it's definitely just one of those. This is for the young kids to keep them happy and entertained, and it just goes with, some of those many songs released in the Diamond and Pearl era that were for the younger fans in the audience. And I'm not sure if there's really much point to this, like much of a plot to the song. It's just, references all these summer things, of just, coconuts and everlasting summer and sweating as hard as we can as we race to the top of the hill. The usual theme of friendship. There are, like, a couple references to, I think, like, summer foods and squid and things. So, like, I can't find any real Pokemon-y references, though, which is what makes it interesting, I think. That, because usually in these songs you would have, like, a lot of, like, calling out the names of the Pokemon and stuff, and this one I don't think does anywhere. So
yeah, a little bit of an oddity there. Like I said, I totally forgot that when I got to the end of the album, when I was re-listening to the score, it surprised me. Oh yeah, this thing. Maybe I never played it on the station either, I'm not sure. But speaking of the score, we definitely have to talk about that. Now, this is another, again, in this era, they're more or less porting over the Japanese score to the English version, with maybe a few exceptions here or there. Let's talk about, what do you think about the score overall?
It's kind of I'm of two minds with it, because there are moments in this score that are fascinating and brilliant. Like, Oracion is one. There's a track called Pokemon Called Gods, and it kind of has some similar things going on, while Sato's having his little nightmare. Like, there's the sound design of this movie and the way the music works with it, because it is a movie where music plays a part in the plot, are used very brilliantly, and I love it. And Alice's flute, the grass flute, anything that takes place, like, in the reverse world, like, there's a lot of beautiful uses of sound and silence and echoes, as well as just sparse but impactful music, like that dong. So I love it. I think it works perfectly. But there are also moments where the score seems very in line with previous Pokemon movies and this sort of impression we've gotten through their scoring. And there are a couple places where I almost want to tell the score to shut up for a second. It's not that it necessarily is a huge departure from the stuff that definitely is inspired by the movie and the needs of the plot, in the way that, say, a couple tracks of the last movie, the Manaphy movie, did not fit in with the whole. But there are times where I think the score just gets a little too loud and a little too Pokemon score kind of way. I don't know if that made any sense, but it made sense in my head. How do you feel about it?
I like it for the most part. We'll definitely talk about Oracion in a little bit here in detail. But, yeah, there's some good themes in there. I think Darkrai has more or less a theme. I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes. If I heard it, I'd probably recognize it instantly. But I think that's very well done. I also think you're hinting there, it sounds like, that going forward from here is when the movies, like I said, I've had some criticisms of the last couple of movies. I haven't listened to the Japanese 20th movie score yet, but I think they're becoming maybe a little less distinct and memorable as time goes on, but there's still some good stuff in this one.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. I think where this score and the previous movie's score really excelled was when they kind of got away from doing things the way they've always done and, like, going for that something completely different. Where, last movie, it was kind of like the marimba feel, and anything that didn't fit in with that almost felt like a letdown or a dissonance. And I think in this movie, the parts of the score that were at their best were the stuff that was completely different from what we typically expect from a Pokemon musical score.
And if I remember correctly, there are a couple game tune cues in there, and they have By Your Side, Dawn's theme. I don't know if that made it into the dub. I think it eventually does in the series. That or Surely Tomorrow does make an instrumental appearance. But as far as this movie score, the score album definitely has a version of By Your Side.
Yeah, it does. I've listened and I've not heard it in the movie. Like, I mean, it might be there and I've just never noticed, but yeah, no, I don't believe it actually made it in the movie. I think it's just in there to couple with the CD.
Well, in any case, we definitely got to talk about the big production number in the score, I suppose you say, Oracion. And that we get a taste of it early with Alice's whistle thing and a little bit of accompaniment there. But of course, the big thing is towards the end they realize they have to find the correct disc and put that in there and get that to play to sort of right everything in the in the city and get the dragons to stop fighting and whatnot. I like the way it sounds. I'm having trouble describing, it's got some very nice interval work, I would say. And, obviously since it's being produced by the bell tower there, that sort of forces certain structural things. What are your thoughts on it?
I agree. And I again, that's kind of what I was trying to get at with all my word vomit about the parts of the score that are at their best are when they're something completely different. Is like the track Oracion and that musical cue, it serves the needs of the plot. It is, in fact, not a musical score so much as it's plot, what's happening. And like the characters and the environment itself is making the noise. It's not a score that just plays under while the action happens. And there's something about that is very visceral, I guess, in the way audiences, but definitely I kind of process the musical score. And you can feel that on some of the other tracks too, again, with a lot of the scenes with Darkrai and its themes, things in the reverse world, when Satoshi's having the nightmare vision things, and the flashbacks with Alice Alicia that Darkrai has, like when the score kind of gets out of the way except for what's actually needed by what's happening in the scene, that's when the musical genius of it kind of floats to the surface. And yeah, the Oracion track, and the things that are happening around it is kind of where that uniqueness comes out too, because again, it's not just a musical cue, it's directly influenced by the actions that we're seeing on screen and the conceits of it, I guess. Like, there's pauses where you can see the hammers moving to hit the bell and things like that.
Yeah, it really is a somewhat unique piece of music. I don't know, looking back at some of the other times we've had these sorts of, some of the other really memorable score cues in Pokemon movies. Speaking from a kind of a dub perspective, you got Tears of Life in the first movie, you've got The Legend Comes to Life in 2000, you've got the Exploring the City theme in movie 5, you've got Make-A-Wish in movie 6. Where do you think, those are some of the best known ones and best liked ones, where do you think this sort of fits in there?
Oh, if I had to rank them, I don't know. Because I am just so in love with Make-A-Wish. But, there is something about this. It's not as well known as, say, Lugia's song or even the Tears of Life. But I almost think that this, if I had to pick one piece to like show the world and be like, this is like the epitome of achievement in Pokemon music or something, it would be Oracion. And again, part of that is its melody, but most of it is the same thing that makes Lugia's song work so well, which is when it opens, it's just that flute and you can almost hear the breath moving across the ocarina with the Chisakimono, a Make-A-Wish. Its appearance in that movie, our first introduction to it is May singing. And there's just something about that that's really special, having it tie into what's actually happening visually. And I say that because I've heard a couple piano covers of Oracion, and it's pretty, but it doesn't do anything special for me. Whereas every time I put in this DVD and that first hammer starts hitting the bells, I get chills.
Personally, I would put definitely The Legend Comes to Life and this Exploring the City theme.
I forgot that one. Yeah,
from movie 5, probably ahead of this, but I think it's maybe in a toss-up with Tears of Life. Obviously, if your experience comes mostly from the earlier movies, Tears of Life is going to win out there. But This is definitely one of the beloved ones. I'm not sure what we get from a later movie that really matches up to this kind of a little bit, sadly. Of course, movie 20 in Japan did write words to this, and we'll talk about that more in our future episode, probably around the time that comes out on video, and we can do some more comparisons there. But yeah, definitely a well-loved entry in the sort of instrumental score library of the franchise.
Definitely.
Okay, so we did get a little bit of feedback on my YouTube channel when I put this out there. This is from Richard Wright, and he says, I use Oracion as my ringtone. It has become one of my favorites from the score. And, it's always an interesting discussion, I suppose, about what Pokemon song you would use as a ringtone. I actually used the phone call sound effect from one of the first episodes of the anime. I cannot claim credit for that idea. Someone else on like the Bulba Garden forums came up with that, and I thought, that's a great idea. And I went on and I did that. What do you think, Anne? Do you think there's something here you might want to use as a ringtone? Would that...
now that he's mentioned it, that sounds like a lovely ringtone to have, particularly to attach to somebody whose call I wanted to get. But if we're going with that theme, like maybe I'd use that track Pokemon called Gods, where it's just like bum bum for maybe, I don't know, my alarm in the morning or something.
Yeah, it sort of depends. I don't know. Having a song like that as my ringtone, probably would throw me for a loop. You always got to be careful when you use a song as a ringtone, is that you might get annoyed in the future when you hear that song in the natural setting. So you do got to be careful there.
It seems to work for him, though, yeah.
But glad to hear that. Feedback always makes these episodes a lot more fun, and we love hearing that. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it for our discussion of the Darkrai movie. The next episode is going to be movie 11. Giratina and the Sky Warrior, aka the Shaman movie, and the Japanese-English matchup there. On the Japanese side, we have One by Crystal K, not to be confused with the song from the Dubs soundtrack to Pokemon Movie 2000. That is something totally different. And on the English side, we have This Is a Beautiful World by Aaron Brotherton, who has... Unfortunately, I was never able to get an interview with him or track him down, but I do know a little bit about him. But otherwise, I think that's going to do it for our discussion of Movie 10, the Darkrai movie. Until our next discussion, Anne, thank you very much for being on here.
Oh, thank you.
This has been Stephen Reich from the Pokepress Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, with Anne from Pikapi Podcast discussing the music of the Darkrai movie.